Just how poor are these two women? They secretly pick up the scattered grains dropped from the cart carrying food in front of them, because their homes suffered from severe flooding this year. All the potatoes planted in the ground rotted away, making it nearly impossible to maintain even basic living, as the eldest son Patsy stares blankly at the ferry heading to Australia across the sea. A bold idea begins to form in his mind. Soon after, the family returns from the fields and happens to come across a wealthy merchant whose carriage is stuck in a ditch, and the merchant takes the initiative to ask for help. But after introducing themselves, they realize the merchant is English, while Patsy's father is Irish. The relationship between the two regions has always been tense, and with English soldiers collecting rent in nearby villages, Patsy's father is unwilling to lend a hand, but the merchant immediately offers money as a reward. After a brief hesitation, the merchant quickly agrees to Patsy's demand of half a crown, yet the father looks troubled, as he would rather let his family go hungry than earn money from an Englishman. But his eldest son does not see it that way, as just a bit of labor could free the carriage. More importantly, earning half a crown would be enough for the family to survive for a while, so why not take such an opportunity? In the end, with Patsy's effort, the carriage is successfully freed from its predicament, after struggling up from the muddy water. According to their agreement, the merchant should hand over the payment, but a merchant is still a merchant, and promises are not easily kept.
I'm afraid I don't have a half crown about me.
Half a crown suddenly turns into a guinea, which is somewhat hard to accept, but fortunately it is a gold sovereign coin, so Patsy does not argue further. However, after the merchant leaves in his carriage, when Patsy is about to hand the coin to his father, the father remains firm. The father never accepts money that feels like charity, and after snatching the coin from his son, he throws it straight into the water. This makes Patsy unable to tolerate his father's stubborn pride. His grandmother also warns him that pride can never satisfy one's needs, but Patsy ignores this, believing that what he earns through his own effort must be taken back with his own hands. So he goes to the water to search, and under the watchful eyes of his younger siblings, he finally finds the coin, and this very object will change their lives forever. Soon after, the four of them visit an even poorer farming family, planning to buy their sow with 1 guinea. Although the pig is the family's lifeline, they know that turning it into cash can better solve their problems, so they painfully agree to sell it. On the way home, the four siblings begin to fantasize about eating pork for an entire week, but as the eldest brother, Patsy thinks differently. He wants to raise the sow to be bigger and sell it for a better price, so they can achieve their dream of emigrating to Australia. As time passes, even when they find edible potatoes while working in the fields, they cannot bear to eat them and save everything for the sow at home. Though life is poor, the four siblings feel happy and look forward to the pig growing up quickly. Soon half a year passes, and Patsy leads the now fattened sow to the market and successfully sells it. Looking at the distance between here and Australia on the map, they feel a real sense of possibility for the first time, but reality is completely different from imagination. The father is still struggling with how to pay the rent owed to the English. Although they live in Ireland, the land belongs to Britain, and they must pay rent every year. With a poor harvest this year, the rent is far from enough, so all hope rests on the money from the pig. But Patsy has secretly sold the sow, and he explains that after asking the immigration office, as long as they pay £8, the whole family can go to Australia. However, the father does not see it that way, as generations of his family have lived here.
You think I'd let the English drive us from this land, to roam the world like some wretched Jew man, and never know a home? I want that pig, Patsy.
It's sold.
When he hears that his son has sold the pig, the father is furious and slaps him hard across the face. To calm her husband's anger, the mother steps forward and removes the only valuable ring she has, hoping to use it to pay the rent. This is the mother's helpless way of protecting her son, but it is met with a harsh refusal from her husband. The air is filled with grief, and no one can change the decision of the head of the family. Patsy can only take a small amount of money from his pocket and hand it to his father, but it is far from enough. His father demands that he hand over everything, and Patsy's eyes are filled with despair.
Dad, you just see sense. Money.
Give me all of it.
No!
A single conflict between father and son causes Patsy's grandmother to collapse from overwhelming stress, bringing her to the brink of death. All the children can do is stay by her side and pray. At this moment, in her final breath, the old woman tells Patsy that she hopes he will obey his father's arrangement and pay this year's rent to the English. After all, this land is their true root. To let his grandmother pass away in peace, Patsy has no choice but to agree to this difficult request. But unexpectedly, he turns around and goes straight to the immigration office. After burying his grandmother, the final day to pay the rent arrives. The British officials never see the family show up, and are forced to take action. The two siblings cannot bear to watch, as just for failing to pay the rent, the British burn down their house. The mother cries out in heartbreak nearby, and the father is filled with anger at his son's actions. The rent that should have been paid to the British has been used by Patsy to buy tickets to Australia. Now the old father refuses to accept fate, but there is nothing he can do. After weeks of sailing, the family finally travels from Ireland to New South Wales in Australia, and they even purchase a carriage along the way, but in a completely unfamiliar place. They do not know how to find a place to settle. They have a relative in the family who moved to Australia with his whole family in 1853, and they had written to this uncle in advance. It has been 20 years since they last met, and only the older generation can still recognize each other, while the younger ones have no memory of this distant relative. However, having family accompany them on the journey is enough to bring them comfort. At this moment, a large flock of crows suddenly appears in the sky. Crows have always symbolized misfortune, but Patsy's family are Catholics, and they believe this is a sign of divine care and guidance for their souls. But is that really the case? After another 2 days of travel, they finally arrive at a nearby town. The sight of the streets is striking and unsettling. Some indigenous people are bound in chains, turned into prisoners to be traded by white settlers. There are also many people with braided hair appearing on the streets from time to time. After asking the driver, Patsy learns that they are all gold seekers from China, each carrying dreams of wealth, opening the eyes of the newly arrived family. Soon, the carriage arrives at the farm where the uncle works. Hearing the commotion, the uncle's wife quickly calls the children out to greet them, her enthusiasm overflowing. But before they can even rest, a burly man approaches and orders them to go meet the farm owner. It turns out the uncle works here and has helped arrange jobs for Patsy's family at the farm. After briefly introducing himself and his wife, the farm owner hands the job arrangements over to the foreman. The foreman takes a quick look at their physical condition, then orders the 3 men to do manual labor, while the remaining 3 women are assigned to the farm owner's wife. The family is now officially settled in Australia, but before starting work, they must first learn how to become proper cowhands. Patsy falls off the horse multiple times, while the foreman watches and laughs with amusement. Not only that, even the aging father is forced to train, which makes him very dissatisfied. And the things that bring dissatisfaction do not end there. At night, the whole family gathers together, and after nearly a month of travel, they finally eat a hot meal. Chatting and laughing, only the old father remains silent. He is still troubled by working under the British, and continues to long for the barren land of Ireland. But Patsy thinks differently, as he believes this is only temporary. As long as they learn skills and save enough money, he will take the family away and find land that truly belongs to them. But no matter how he explains it, his father still refuses to accept his idea. A good meal ends in an atmosphere of deep awkwardness. The next day, the foreman takes them up the mountain to harvest timber. This kind of work is difficult for both young and old, and the youngest son is even scolded by the foreman. Then suddenly, an unexpected accident occurs. The old father and other workers are loading timber, when the latch of the carriage suddenly slips loose.
The sky, so bright.
In the end, the old father leaves this world, holding onto his stubborn pride. This devastating fate is something Patsy cannot bear. It is not until midnight that the 2 brothers finally drag their father's body back. The mother rushes forward anxiously to meet them, and the sight before her causes her to completely break down. This accident shatters the family's stable life, forcing Patsy to shoulder the responsibility of supporting the family far earlier than expected. He is consumed with guilt for persuading his father to come to Australia and for failing to protect him, and this guilt becomes the source of his lifelong resilience and determination. The next day, they invite a priest from the local area and bury their father according to Catholic rites. At the same time, the farm owner arrives at the scene in his carriage. He is not there to mourn, but because the contract originally required 3 male laborers, and now 1 is gone, he demands to revise the agreement by extending the term from 4 years to 8 years to make up for the loss. Only after the farm owner leaves does the mother fully realize what has happened. In order to free the family from the farm owner's control as soon as possible, Patsy begins to make plans. He first goes to a local gold mining company, where they are in need of a sharp-minded salesman, but Patsy is still a contracted laborer, and the boss rejects him on the spot. However, after learning that Patsy is also Irish and hearing about his journey, the boss feels sympathy and is willing to give him a chance. But when Patsy tells the farm owner about this, the man firmly refuses to let him go. A signed contract is protected by law, and it must be fulfilled for the full 8 years. The entire family is bound by the contract, and no one can be missing. If Patsy dares to run away, the farm owner will have the police chase him down, and the consequences would be severe. This is perhaps something Patsy had already anticipated. That very night, he still chooses to run. The next morning, instead of immediately pursuing him, the farm owner gathers the family and takes a different approach. With only one male laborer left, a girl must take his place. Sarah is chosen, even though she is not yet 20 years old. Whatever the farm owner says goes. And just like that, Sarah replaces her brother, puts on men's clothes, and cuts off her long hair as her mother watches in tears. From then on, Sarah rides horses and works with fierce determination, becoming a bold and capable cowgirl. Meanwhile, Patsy thrives in the gold mining business, diligently working as a salesman, until one night, when he sees a massive gold nugget, and something inside him is completely ignited. If he goes prospecting himself, he could earn the money to redeem his family much faster, so he takes advantage of his position and joins an Irish gold prospecting team. At the same time, the farm owner, seeking greater profit, sells the youngest daughter Mary to a wealthy household as a servant. The entire family is torn apart, and no one knows if they will ever reunite. In the blink of an eye, a year passes. On a clear morning, the mother unexpectedly spots a familiar figure. It is Patsy. The man carrying the mission of his family has returned. Patsy's return feels like a surge of strength for his mother, and his siblings, who rush over after hearing the news, are overjoyed. However, just as the family reunites, the farm owner steps out with a whip in hand. This boy dared to flee the farm before, and now he has the nerve to come back, which is utterly unacceptable. But Patsy uses the money he earned from gold prospecting to try to buy back the family's contracts.
Mr. Longman, I have £115 for you. I'll be taking my family.
Get off my land now!
We'll all be gone the minute I've paid you.
You misunderstand me. You go, they stay.
The atmosphere becomes tense, yet Patsy is determined, and no one can stop the family from leaving, even as the uncle and aunt witness everything. At that moment, Patsy throws the money he earned onto the farm owner with force. He is no longer anyone's servant, and he will take his family away from this place forever, even inviting Jimmy, the Indigenous man who once helped them, to join them. Life begins to show a new dawn, and regaining freedom is a happiness beyond words for the family. Now, the first thing Patsy must do is go to the local colonial administration to purchase a piece of land that belongs to him. But for an Irishman with no background, owning land here seems impossible, and the registrar rejects his request outright. At this moment, the financial boss who once helped him steps forward and offers to act as Patsy's guarantor. Even so, the registrar still hesitates. It turns out that the farm owner who once employed Patsy holds influence in the town, and the registrar fears offending him, so he does not dare make a decision easily. But Patsy cannot wait any longer, and he grabs a pen, urging the man to sign on the map. The registrar remains conflicted, but under Patsy's piercing gaze, he finally gives in. The moment the name is signed on the map, Patsy fulfills his father's lifelong dream of owning land. This marks their transformation from ordinary people into ranch owners, and it signifies the true beginning of the Durack family's legacy in Australia. And just like that, the family builds their own home beside a forest stream. As time passes, they begin to raise livestock, and under their careful care, herds of fine beef cattle grow stronger, and it is finally time to take them to the market and sell them for a good price. However, fate takes an unexpected turn, as these cattle should have been in high demand. Yet when the auctioneer calls for bids, he deliberately downplays Patsy's cattle as inferior, and the prices offered by the butchers on site are far below market value, leaving the siblings unable to accept it. Behind all of this is the English farm owner pulling the strings. He controls the local commodity market and intentionally forces the butchers to lower their bids, ensuring that the cattle Patsy worked so hard to raise cannot be sold, as a form of revenge for their past conflict. Now that things have come to this, Patsy decides to drive the cattle back and refuses to sell them. But at that moment, a rancher named Costello calls out to him. He is an Irishman who has lived in Australia since childhood, and he explains that in this region, Cattle raised by Irish people are always sold to traders at low prices, and this situation has lasted for many years. Only then does Patsy realize that the English have been deliberately suppressing them. But this is not Ireland. It is a brand new colonial land, and he believes no one can drive them away from here. Yet the farm owner Longman and his allies control the town, and if they order that no one is to buy your cattle, then no trader will dare to take your reins. As the two argue back and forth, a beautiful young woman approaches them.
My sister Mary.
How's it going? Pleased to meet you.
We're at Tea Tree Station. You must come to visit.
Indeed we must.
The girl has a fresh and gentle appearance, but Patsy pays her little attention, still troubled by the fate of his cattle. Then he comes up with an idea. Since they are not welcomed by the British here, why not sell the cattle to the nearby mining area? There are thousands of gold prospectors there, but Longman does not allow sales outside of this market. If he insists on trying, that old man will stop him, but in Patsy's heart, nothing can defeat him. He decides to break the rules, believing that Irish people should stand united.
You have some stock, I understand, Mr. Costello.
My father has some stuff.
Yes.
Perhaps everyone must find a way to survive in hardship, and through constant struggle and adversity, become stronger. Soon after, the siblings personally visit Costello's home, hoping to persuade his father to join them, but after hearing their intentions, the lady of the house keeps interrupting the conversation and asks where Patsy and his sister are from in Ireland. Her tone and manner are full of arrogance, making even her husband beside her feel embarrassed, so he invites Patsy to step outside to talk, leaving the women to chat inside. The lady's arrogance comes from the fact that she is English. She even knows that Sarah cannot play the piano, yet still asks her to try, and after the girl declines, she immediately asks her own daughter to play instead. Although Mary feels a bit embarrassed, she has no choice but to agree to her mother's request, which makes Sarah feel uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the three men have a pleasant conversation outside. Although the English have long suppressed them, this father has never sought revenge. Now that times have changed, Patsy's determination is firm, as he wants to carve out a new path for the Irish. He knows it is difficult to convince the man to join, but the older man says he is not of noble birth, and he still remembers the hardships of coming to Australia with his parents as a child. They originally had 10 siblings, but 4 of them died during the sea voyage, and those painful years are something he can never forget. So when they return to the room, the older man decides to join Patsy's plan and attempt to sell their cattle in the goldfields, but his wife is the first to oppose it.
And what will Mr. Longman think of such a partnership?
It's settled.
Mr. Longman might not see it that way.
Mr. Longman can think which way he likes, Mother.
Mary, you don't understand.
I do understand. You're saying we can't sell outside the market Mr. Longman and his friends control for fear of offending them. This is a new country. We can do as we like.
Sarah's words leave the siblings in high spirits on their way home. They never expected that a seemingly gentle woman could possess such strong ideas and courage. It also stirs something in Patsy, as he declares his intention to marry her. A woman like this would greatly help his ambitions, and now that he has met her, he will cherish the opportunity. Before long, Patsy hosts a gathering at his home, inviting neighbors from nearby areas, with special focus on inviting Mary's family. In fact, from the very first moment the girl saw Patsy, her heart was already drawn to him. As the crowd gradually disperses, the two of them go to a quiet place to talk alone, expressing their feelings for each other. Though Mary does not expect Patsy to propose so suddenly, but will her mother agree to this? At the same time, when Mary's mother discovers that she has been alone with Patsy, this proud English woman becomes furious. There is a clear class difference between the two families, so the mother refuses to let her daughter fall for this poor young man, not knowing that the two have already reached the point of discussing marriage.
Mary! What are you doing here alone with Mr. Durack?
He was asking me to marry him.
Upon hearing this, the mother is nearly overwhelmed, but Mary has already made up her mind, and no one can change her choice. And just like that, amid the cheers of friends and family, Patsy gets married and drives away in a carriage with his beautiful bride. Yet among the waves of laughter, only Mary's mother is left in tears, though at this point she has no choice but to accept it. The union of two Irish ranching families in a foreign land carries extraordinary meaning. It will also provide Patsy with a stable partnership for his future endeavors. But in a colony ruled by the British, will they simply let this go? The wedding dance is lively, and everyone is immersed in the joy of the moment. Patsy's youngest sister also seems to find a hint of her own sweetness. At the same time, unexpected connections begin to unfold. Another sister happens to notice a young man, who is watching others dance and has not yet noticed her, though a spark is about to ignite. As evening approaches, everyone continues dancing, and Sarah's thoughts never leave the boy nearby. In the end, filled with excitement, Sarah breaks the silence and invites him to dance with her. Although the boy is shy, he cannot resist Sarah's fiery spirit, as she grabs him and runs outside. However, at this very moment, a carefully planned disaster is about to unfold. Several visitors holding torches secretly set fire to the hay on the ranch. Not only that, they also go to the stream where the livestock drink and pour a bottle of highly toxic substance into the water. It is clear they intend to wipe out Patsy's cattle. Meanwhile, everyone continues to enjoy the joyful night, completely unaware that disaster is approaching. The fire spreads near the enclosure, turning this extraordinary night into one blazing with chaos. A group of people rush to use water from the river to try to stop the fire from spreading. At the same time, they quickly drive the cattle away to minimize their losses. Working together with full effort, they battle the flames until midnight, finally managing to extinguish the fire completely. It leaves the newlyweds utterly exhausted on their wedding night. Yet the mood is not entirely lost, and Mary even gives her husband a special gift: a pocket watch with an engraved portrait. The next day, Jimmy from the ranch works with Patsy's brother to investigate the cause of the fire. From the hoof prints at the scene, it is clear that this must have been done by the men of the Englishman Longman. At the same time, Sarah rushes over in panic and delivers even more devastating news: that all the cattle that drank from the stream have died. This is a fatal blow to the ranch, and it is obvious that someone poisoned the water, with the culprit undoubtedly being that hateful Englishman. Meanwhile, inside a solemn church, Longman is calmly humming hymns as if nothing has happened. At this moment, an enraged Patsy bursts through the door.
He fired my grass and he poisoned my water.
You're insane.
I'm hung for attempted murder.
Papist, you've no right to be here. Leave with your people or I'll have the sergeant call his men.
I've evidence.
What evidence?
My man, Jimmy, tracked Fruin's horse.
Your evidence against me is the word of a black man.
For an Irishman who has only recently arrived to challenge a British power deeply rooted in the colony is like striking a stone with an egg. Only now does Patsy realize that he cannot change the system or shake British authority. Since he cannot confront them, he decides to find a way to leave and seek a new land to survive. So he learns from the financial boss that the Queensland government is recruiting new settlers and offering land grants of 100 square miles. It is a number so astonishing that it leaves him speechless. However, that place is somewhat barren and has never been developed by white settlers. As soon as the mother-in-law hears this, she immediately backs out. Why go suffer in a desolate land where nothing thrives? And she even refuses to let her daughter go with him. Not only that, his sister Sarah also strongly opposes the idea, as she would rather live quietly here than venture into an uninhabited wilderness. At this moment, Patsy continues to argue his case with firm conviction.
Patsy! You were a gambling man.
It's not a gamble.
We're not coming.
The scene falls into silence, as it seems no one is willing to gamble their future on Patsy's plan. But his mother thinks completely differently, as now that things have come to this point, she will not stop her son from going anywhere to pursue his dreams. However, she chooses to stay behind and live with her daughters. It seems the women are united in opposition, while the men are filled with excitement. After all, this land is 100 times larger than Longman's farm. At this moment, the usually silent father-in-law finally speaks up. He suggests that Patsy should first go and inspect the place, and only decide whether to move the whole family after confirming it is suitable for living and grazing. If the reality turns out worse than expected, they can cut their losses in time and avoid dragging the entire family into an uncertain predicament. So Patsy follows his father-in-law's advice and sets off on a long journey with his younger brother and Jimmy. No one knows when they will meet again, but one thing is certain: Patsy is not a man who ever gives up. After 2 months of travel, the four of them finally see the place they have dreamed of, but it is even worse than they imagined. Nothing but a scorching barren wasteland with no sign of life. What they need most now is water, and Jimmy, feeling hopeless, even urges Patsy to turn back. But a determined man never bows to hardship. At the same time, something happens not far away. A group of armed Indigenous people rushes toward them at full speed. Seeing their approach, Patsy does not flee with his companions, but remains calm and tries to communicate. But with different customs and languages across regions, they chatter in words he cannot understand. Patsy hopes Jimmy can translate, but having been raised among white settlers, he no longer remembers the language of his ancestors. With no other choice, Patsy uses hand gestures to show that they are searching for water, but the indigenous people pretend not to understand and urge them to leave, as if they have trespassed on their land. Patsy ignores their hostility, as after all the effort it took to get here, he has no intention of turning back easily, so despite their fierce stares, he calmly continues forward, and his companions can only follow behind. After months of struggling in the wasteland, they are nearly out of supplies, and if they do not return soon, they may perish there. Even his companions begin to persuade him to give up. Though unwilling, Patsy has no choice but to accept reality. Yet fortune favors those with strong will, and just as they begin heading back, Patsy suddenly notices a flock of crows soaring across the sky. He immediately realizes that when birds fly in groups toward the same direction, they are likely heading toward water. At the same time, the direction those indigenous people came from matches the flight of the crows, meaning the water source lies in the opposite direction, but he does not reveal this, instead quietly rejoicing, knowing he will return to this place again. Meanwhile, Mary endures her own hardship in life, and with the help of family and friends, she safely gives birth to a baby boy. This is the only moment of joy for the family during the nearly 1 year of her husband's absence, but unexpectedly, just after the baby is born, Sarah throws the child into a pit, and with that, episode 4 of the story comes to an end. This woman has just given birth, and the baby is taken away and placed into a pit in the yard. At first, I thought they were going to bury the child, but to my surprise, the rest of the family kneels beside him and begins to pray. It turns out this is a tradition among Irish Catholic immigrants, symbolizing that from the moment of birth, the child is bound to this land. It is both a prayer to God and a spiritual covenant between the pioneers and the land. And just like that, 2 months pass in the blink of an eye. While taking care of the baby, Mary suddenly realizes that her husband, who has been away for over a year exploring new land, has returned. It has truly not been easy. When he left, he was a handsome young man, but now he is bearded and rugged, looking almost like a wild man. At the same time, the baby's cries break the silence of their reunion. It turns out that during his absence, Mary has given birth to a healthy baby boy for Patsy. She has named the child Michael, after Patsy's late father, symbolizing the continuation of life and the inheritance of spirit. With everything ready, Patsy borrows money from the financial backer and begins preparing supplies for the expedition, but Jimmy, who once supported him, does not want to leave with him, and this brings up the tension between different peoples. Although Jimmy was raised among white settlers, he knows that indigenous blood runs through him. Once the first white man settles there, many more will follow. When that happens, they will compete with the indigenous people for resources, and violence will become inevitable. Jimmy cannot accept that, so he chooses to step away. As Patsy leads his family to relocate, Jimmy remains on the hillside, watching them leave. No one knows if the two brothers will ever meet again in this lifetime. After a long and exhausting journey, they finally arrive at this scorching land. Before entering the area, they have also purchased 1,000 head of cattle, but where exactly is the water Patsy spoke of? In fact, the crows in the sky have already shown the way. Not long after, a tribal leader fishing by the river notices something unusual. A white man is seen riding at full speed, heading straight toward the only river in the region. Yes, he has done it, and this water will completely change their fate. Although the indigenous man cannot understand his words, the excitement on Patsy's face reveals everything, as he has conquered this barren land with passion and courage. At the same time, a massive herd of cattle charges toward the area, followed by the voices of Patsy's brother and Costello calling out. Everyone is overwhelmed with excitement. Where there is water, there is hope for life, and it becomes the spiritual foundation for them to settle here. So Patsy brings his wife and child forward, preparing to make contact with the indigenous people of this land. Mary is still holding a baby in her arms, one who was born during the journey. Soon, both sides introduce themselves. Although there is a language barrier, the indigenous people show no hostility and even take the initiative to hold Mary's child. It is clear that they appreciate each other, but will this sense of admiration last? As time quickly passes, 5 years go by in an instant. The ranch is thriving, and as Patsy's business continues to expand, it attracts many white cowboys to help manage the land. At the same time, after giving birth to 2 sons, Mary is now expecting another child. However, this year's dry season seems longer than ever, causing food shortages among the indigenous people. Mary often does good deeds, distributing food to them, but some people are never satisfied. Seeing that Buntamura, who is also indigenous, has grown close to Mary. Others begin to suspect that he has been secretly keeping food for himself, clearly driven by jealousy. A few harsh words quickly escalate, and they end up fighting, throwing the scene into complete chaos. At the same time, Mary's son unexpectedly takes a gun from inside the house. Although the situation calms down, Mary realizes that the child she is about to deliver may not survive. Life is never a smooth road, and some tragedies are like starlight held in your hand that suddenly shatters. She watches as her husband shovels dirt over the infant, each motion striking her heart like a heavy blow. All the words of welcome that were never spoken turn into silence buried beneath the soil, and even the air feels too heavy to breathe. Meanwhile, Patsy's younger brother and his companions travel to New South Wales to sell some high-quality cattle. Unexpectedly, they run into their sister whom they have not seen for a long time. It has been 5 full years since they last met, and naturally, they have so much to say. At the same time, unexpected connections continue to unfold. When the mother sees her youngest son return home, she is overjoyed. But soon, the brother delivers a message from Patsy, saying that he has now established himself in Queensland and hopes the entire family will come and settle there. However, the drought has lasted for a long time this year, and the brother suggests waiting until next year, but the sister holds a completely different view. She is the first to support leaving immediately, and her husband will go with her as well. So the family sets off on a long journey together. However, the entire route is extremely grueling. The barren land causes constant arguments between Sarah and her husband, triggering early labor, and she has no choice but to give birth under these harsh conditions. The mother temporarily acts as a midwife, with help from the brother's girlfriend. With their assistance, Sarah gives birth to her second child in the wilderness. After a brief rest, the family sets out once again. Finally, after more than 2 months of travel, they safely arrive at Patsy's ranch. After so many years apart, the family is reunited, a moment that is deeply moving. Patsy has also fulfilled his dream, taking on the responsibility of caring for his family. He provides them with a warm place where they can truly settle and build a life. The family even thoughtfully brings a piano for Mary, allowing her to reconnect with the beauty she once cherished. At night, Patsy invites a violinist, and the family dances traditional Irish dances in the open yard. But unexpectedly, a storm of conflict is about to unfold. A hired cowboy on the ranch, seemingly unable to endure his loneliness, goes to the area where the indigenous people gather in search of a woman. He is soon captured by the indigenous people and brought before Patsy. It is clear that he has broken the rules here, so Patsy dismisses him on the spot without hesitation. But this cowboy will go on to cause further harm. At the same time, thunder suddenly rolls across the sky, and a heavy rain begins to pour without warning. This is a moment everyone has been waiting for, as without it, they would struggle to face the coming crisis. People dance in the rain, celebrating this gift from above. 3 days later, the once dry river is now filled with water, yet the dismissed cowboy still lingers near the ranch. He unexpectedly spots an indigenous woman working and develops malicious intent. Taking advantage of a moment when Patsy's family is not paying attention, he abducts the woman, and with that, Episode 5 of the story comes to an end. The King of Grassland Episode 5 weaves a dialectical epic of colonial history centered on land. The ritual of burying a newborn into the soil is both a spiritual covenant between Irish immigrants and the land, and the original imprint of a settler's instinct to take root. The land shifts from a sacred refuge into a symbol of possession. Patsy's ecstatic triumph in finding water stands in sharp contrast to the silent gaze of the indigenous chief. The discovery of water becomes a declaration of conquest for the settlers, yet it also marks the beginning of disaster for the native people. Through the intertwining of birth and death, the narrative subtly reveals the bloody cost of expansion. When the symbols of civilization, the piano and violin, echo across the wilderness, the settler's dream of home has already begun to trample the foundations of indigenous survival. The dismissed cowboy's abduction of an indigenous woman feels like lightning before a storm. It foreshadows an irreconcilable clash between two civilizations that will inevitably stain this promised land. How tragic is the fate of the imprisoned indigenous woman. She is held captive by the white cowboy for 3 full days, merely to satisfy his suppressed desires in this desolate land. Just as the man prepares to act again, the woman's companions searching the hills discover his location and launch a silent attack. A blade pierces his body, and the cowboy finally pays the price. The indigenous people successfully rescue their companion, and it seems the matter is finally over, but fate takes another cruel turn, as the newly established law enforcement patrols the barren fields once every week. By sheer coincidence, the inspector discovers the body of the slain man near the shallows. A white man killed in indigenous territory immediately leads the inspector to assume who the killers are. They mount their horses and rush to the location, launching an attack without any investigation. Shockingly, among the officers are men who share the same skin color as the indigenous people. In a short time, an entire tribal group is wiped out, and even those barely alive are shot again without mercy. At the same time, another unaware indigenous man approaches after hearing the gunshots, only to be stopped at gunpoint by the inspector. Upon learning that he works for the rancher Patsy, the inspector decides not to pursue the matter further. This allows the man named Buntamora to survive, but all the people he grew up with are gone, including his wife. This event is not just part of the story, but a symbol of violence and guilt in Australia's colonial frontier history. It exposes the historical cost behind the success of the Durack family and forces Patsy to confront the conflict between morality and belief for the first time. Perhaps only now does he realize that the land he loves was never truly conquered by him, but taken. This realization becomes the source of his lifelong guilt and silence. It is worth noting that the original author is a descendant of the Durack family. When writing this story in the mid-20th century, the author was already aware of the colonial scars behind their ancestors' expansion. This massacre is rooted in real history and reveals an unchanging truth. The success of one people is often accompanied by the destruction of another. Meanwhile, an indigenous officer washes away the blood left by his own people with his dark, weathered hands. What a deeply ironic image this is. At the same time, an enraged Patsy brings his brother to the riverbank to demand an explanation from the resting inspector, but the inspector dismisses the incident as insignificant, claiming it is simply government policy. The life of any white person is considered far more valuable than that of an indigenous person, and force must be used to ensure protection. Even if Patsy himself were harmed, they would respond in the same way.
I don't need protection from them. They are the gentlest people on God's earth. And you have taught them to murder each other.
We'd never do that.
You've just done it!
The inspector argues that Patsy misunderstands, saying that using indigenous officers to suppress other indigenous people benefits both sides, because Australia is home to many different indigenous groups, and conflicts already exist among them. By using those who have been assimilated to control others, it not only maintains colonial order and divides indigenous communities, but also allows settlers to carry out violence with less moral burden. At this moment, Patsy finally understands everything, and his heart sinks into despair. He realizes that he can do nothing here, but to avoid witnessing more violence, he makes a bold decision. He sends his two sons away for education and prepares to sell all the livestock on the ranch, because violence has poisoned his land, and now the land has lost him as well. He always believed he was different from other white settlers, and it is this sense of conscience that ultimately drives him to leave. When the day of departure arrives, Buntamora seems reluctant to say goodbye. This rugged man knows deeply that Patsy is one of the few good people here. After living together on this barren land for so many years, Buntamora even wishes to leave with him. Although his wife thinks it is a good idea, Patsy firmly refuses, because they plan to move to Brisbane, a city belonging to white society. In the reality of colonial life, a white family traveling with an indigenous companion would face rejection. Indigenous people have almost no space to survive or legal standing in such cities. Patsy understands this clearly, and taking him to Brisbane would only expose him to more discrimination while placing his own family in an awkward position, so they have no choice but to part ways. However, Patsy leaves his home behind for him and even gives him some of the remaining horses on the ranch. A gesture of deep friendship between them. Time passes quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 10 years go by. By now, Patsy's family has grown wealthy through business. This marks his transformation from a frontier pioneer into a refined gentleman in the city. At the same time, today is his eldest son Michael's 21st birthday, and the entire family gathers together. Patsy even prepares a cake shaped like the map of Australia, clearly hinting that this celebration carries deeper meaning, and indeed it does. Taking advantage of everyone being present, he recounts their journey from Ireland to Australia, and the price they paid to reach where they are today is beyond words. At the same time, though not yet old, Patsy makes a major decision. He wants his 2 sons to inherit his legacy early and contribute to the family's future, requiring them to take part in managing land and to set out for the Kimberley next month. Everyone offers congratulations, but the 2 sons appear disappointed, worried that they are too young. Patsy then asks their uncle to accompany them.
We were supposed to go to university.
MP, you've enough education and you should last you 10 lifetimes.
Patsy, I think if we'd discussed this before you made a public announcement.
There's nothing to discuss.
Not only are the mother and sons dissatisfied, but Patsy's sister-in-law also refuses. She says that during those years on the ranch, her husband rarely lived a stable life. He was either out herding cattle or traveling between towns to sell beef. Now that life has finally settled, Patsy is asking them to go to another barren land again, but Patsy insists that if she does not want to be separated from her husband and children, then the whole family should go together. Seeing the determination in his wife's eyes, the younger brother ultimately refuses his older brother's arrangement. The atmosphere falls into silence. Patsy cannot escalate the conflict with his brother, but his 2 sons must still follow his decision, so he cuts 2 slices of cake, symbolizing the land and inheritance passed on to each son. Even if it does not taste good, they must swallow it. 2 months later, the brothers arrive in Kimberley, a region newly opened by the colonial government. The land is fertile and water is abundant, which is exactly why Patsy has chosen it for them to develop a new ranch. But after only a few days, the young men begin to grow tired of the place. And with that, Episode 6 of the story comes to an end. The King of Grassland Episode 6 tears open the blood-stained scars of Australia's frontier history through a cold depiction of a colonial massacre. The narrative skillfully intertwines individual acts of violence with systemic wrongdoing, the bias of the white judicial system and the identity paradox of Indigenous auxiliary police together form a precise machine of colonial violence. Patsy's awakening and retreat reveal the limits of moral redemption, where conscience ultimately yields to the structure of power. The most painful truth lies in the self-replication of colonial logic. The map-shaped cake and the sons being forced to inherit the mission of land ownership suggest that violence is being repackaged as family legacy. As indigenous blood seeps into the red soil while the anxieties of settlers continue across generations, the story strips away the illusion of colonial mythology. What is called progress and civilization is nothing more than a cycle of enduring wounds. They were originally 2 wealthy young heirs, but their father forbade them from continuing their education and sent them to manage a remote ranch. However, the 2 brothers grew tired of it within just a couple of days, and even trivial chores like doing laundry had to be handled by themselves. So, under the instigation of their companions, they decided to capture some local indigenous people to serve as laborers on the ranch.
Like these blacks are wild beggars. You can't reason with them.
Soon after, several white men reached an agreement and arrived at the tribe armed with weapons to seize people. As soon as the indigenous people saw the intruders, they were terrified and scattered in all directions, yet some were still captured. At the same time, the indigenous people were not defenseless. They picked up wooden spears and were eager to fight back. The scene shifts to the brothers' old home in Brisbane. A maid unexpectedly discovers a stranger resting in the yard. Without understanding the situation, she steps forward to take a closer look, only to find an unfamiliar dark-skinned man. The maid is instantly overwhelmed with panic, and upon hearing her screams, the lady rushes to the upstairs window to check, only to realize it is an old friend she has not seen for many years. Ever since they parted at the ranch, 10 years have passed without a meeting, and both sides find it impossible to suppress their longing for each other. Soon after, Patsy prepares a lavish meal to entertain this friend from afar. The reason Buntamura appears now is because he has heard that Patsy's 2 sons have run into trouble. Being an indigenous man himself, he is willing to travel to the southwestern region of Australia to help the 2 young heirs manage the ranch. The lady feels deeply grateful for everything Buntamura has done for their family. At the same time, Patsy decides to travel with him to the Kimberley to find out what exactly has happened there. However, before setting off, he needs to meet with the bankers first, allowing Buntamura to enjoy the local cuisine. So Patsy takes his brother to the bank to discuss funding and land development plans. The map on the table is the urban planning layout of Brisbane, but in reality, it is used to explain how they can use city assets as collateral to secure bank loans and invest in the Kimberley Ranch. Patsy hopes to use this method to establish a large Kimberley Ranch group and build the largest pastoral empire in northwestern Australia. Therefore, they verbally confirm a loan agreement of £100,000, with the formal contract to be handled by his brother later. Meanwhile, he needs to hurry to the ranch with Buntamura, first, to determine the specific development plan of the ranch, and second, to resolve the troubles his two sons have fallen into. But the two young heirs were not informed in advance, and when they see their father arrive, they are filled with shock. In reality, the brothers feel afraid because they have done something wrong, and they fear being blamed once their father finds out. Soon after, Patsy offers his condolences to the victim's brother, believing they have suffered an attack from Indigenous people, not knowing that his sons have not told him the truth at all. It is not until a remark from a nearby worker that,
"Hey! Don't go wandering around here on your own. We got better things to do than dig graves of blackfellas."
Pumpkin's a family friend, Michael.
Patsy realizes the situation is far more complicated than it seems. While their father walks around leading his horse, the brothers quickly urge the worker to stay silent, fearing that any revelation would lead to serious consequences. Meanwhile, a devastating disaster is about to unfold. After learning that Patsy has left home, the bank representatives take the initiative to meet with his brother to discuss the contract. They present a proposal that appears generous on the surface but is actually full of hidden risks. They offer to inject capital to help the Durack family develop the Kimberley Ranch in exchange for partial ownership and management rights of the land. In other words, this is not a simple loan, but a joint investment arrangement. On the surface it is assistance, but in reality it is a predatory deal. The banker sees on Patsy's brother's lack of understanding of the hidden traps in financial terms, and by provoking him with the claim that he cannot make decisions without Patsy present, they push him to finally take charge for once and sign a contract worth as much as £600,000. And this marks the beginning of the downfall of the Durack family. Yet his wife seems somewhat dissatisfied with her husband's indecisiveness. Patsy and Buntamura wander through the Kimberley for a full 2 months without encountering a single Indigenous person, until they accidentally come across a stretch of ruins in a valley, and the bullet holes piercing through the skulls make them realize that a massacre once took place here.
The police came. They led a party.
Were you in it?
The police advised us not to say.
Were you in it?
So which of these poor creatures murdered your cousin? This one? Maybe it was this one, huh? It's a child!
When you came up here, you guaranteed this would happen.
Oh, so it's my fault, is it?
When you went to Thylunga with the best of intentions, did you stop it from happening there?
No, I didn't.
No, this whole thing started when you came here to make a life and get away from the English.
We were starving!
But in coming here, you did to others what the English did to you. And by running from them, you've made their empire all the larger.
His son's words leave him unable to argue back, and cause Patsy's beliefs to collapse once again. That's right, the ranch massacre 10 years ago happened because of their involvement. Although many years have passed, it is unexpected that his sons now find themselves in exactly the same situation. Perhaps this is the ultimate reflection of the story. The triumph of civilization and the failure of humanity are often two sides of the same coin. Patsy can no longer calmly believe that his career is honorable, and it is time for him to leave the ranch. But this time Buntamura does not want to go back with him, choosing instead to stay behind. He believes the children there need care, and perhaps only with his presence can peaceful coexistence with the Indigenous people be achieved. Patsy bids a heartfelt farewell to his old friend, and the friendship built between two men of different races seems to have long transcended the barriers of skin color and culture. On this land filled with uncertainty and challenge, the purest light of humanity shines, becoming the most precious bond in each other's lives. Before long, Patsy returns to his home in Brisbane, but the situation he faces is extremely dire. He rushes to the bank without stopping, only to find it crowded with citizens who have lost their investments. At the same time, the bank manager informs him that his family business has completely gone bankrupt, with total debts amounting to £600,000. Patsy had originally invested only £100,000, while the additional $500,000 was a loan his brother took out in his name while he was away. Now the real estate, the gold mines, the hotels, All resources and everything they owned are gone. After decades of hard work, Patsy loses everything overnight. For the first time in his life, this man past middle age feels utterly powerless, even his hands trembling. Fortunately, the land of the Kimberly Ranch had long been registered under his son's name, which might allow them to escape this financial crisis. Soon after, Patsy returns home in despair, and his wife has already learned the full story. Although he is filled with self-blame, Mary has never once complained about him. Those difficult years were endured together by the two of them. It is precisely because of those rare experiences that their bond has grown deeper, allowing them to continue forward without ever abandoning each other. But Patsy's other family members do not see it that way. When you have money, everyone crowds around you. When you have none, even your own siblings will point fingers and curse you. With this, Episode 7 of the series comes to an end. The King of Grass Treasure Episode 7 uses the cruel symmetry of sons inheriting their father's path to portray the generational transmission of colonial logic. The brothers' act of capturing indigenous people precisely replicates the violent patterns of the previous generation. Buntamura's return becomes a mirror reflecting conscience. More profoundly, the collusion between capital and colonial expansion is revealed, as the Banks trap brings down the family empire and exposes the fragility of primitive accumulation. Patsy loses everything once again, suggesting that the colonial enterprise will ultimately turn against itself. Meanwhile, Buntamura chooses to stay and protect the land, forming a sorrowful contrast to Patsy's departure. Those who truly belong to this land are never the ones who take from it, but the ones who protect it. This man has just learned that he is bankrupt, yet his lifelong partner chooses to stand by him without hesitation, because those difficult years were walked together by the two of them. But when Patsy walks into the inner room and faces the other family members, his sister-in-law is the first to step forward and accuse him. The woman looks fierce and aggressive, and it is only when the elderly matriarch intervenes that her emotions are temporarily calmed. Then the elderly matriarch clearly tells her daughter-in-law that Patsy is a man who loves taking risks, and it was his efforts that led everyone to prosperity. If you dislike people with a spirit of adventure, then you should never have married into the Durack family in the first place. When one person rises to success, even the chickens and dogs benefit. When one person falls into ruin, they are condemned by all. It was the younger brother's reckless decision to increase the investment behind his back that brought Patsy to such a miserable state. Now that things have reached this point, even Patsy's mansion no longer belongs to him. So after much hesitation, Sarah asks her brother and sister-in-law to stay at her house for the time being. But Mary understands clearly that when people are poor, living together is manageable. Yet now that times have changed, surviving under someone else's roof will only invite cold stares. So the couple decides to move to their son's ranch, believing this may be the best choice for everyone. The situation is now clear. The younger brother's family is unwilling to continue following Patsy, while the mother moves in with her eldest daughter. A family that rose from nothing and returned to nothing can now only go their separate ways. Life is always filled with regret and helplessness. From standing together in hardship to drifting apart in different directions, the rise and fall of the Durack family hides too many choices made against one's will. After the younger sister takes their mother away, Patsy and his wife also set off on a new journey. After several weeks of travel, they finally arrive in the southwestern region of Australia. The temporary tents built by their sons display a banner written in Irish Gaelic, expressing a warm welcome. This perhaps carries a deeper meaning. Although they are far from Ireland, their hearts and their roots still remain there. Soon after, the mother reunites with her two sons after 2 years apart. At this moment, all worries are forgotten, and being together as a family becomes the greatest happiness. At the same time, their old friend Buntamura has found a wife locally and has hired many workers to help run the ranch. But with their father's arrival, the two sons make one thing clear. They do not want him to interfere in any matters related to the land. It feels like a lifetime has passed, as Patsy has become just like his own father, while the personalities of his two sons mirror his younger self. This is a silent foreshadowing buried by time, as the lives of two generations are etched with strikingly similar patterns. Now that he is not allowed to participate in developing the land, he might as well live as a carefree old man and enjoy a peaceful life with his wife. But within Patsy's blood flows a restless spirit that refuses to settle for an ordinary life. As he watches his sons plan the land, the unfulfilled ambitions and his desire for control refuse to fade quietly with time. His wife seems to sense his helplessness as well. If he continues to suppress himself like this, it will eventually take a toll on his health. So Mary approaches their two sons and explains their father's inner struggle, hoping they can find some work for him on this land. However, There was an agreement between father and sons that he would not interfere in the development of the land.
Well, he can't spend the rest of his life weeding cabbages or he will surely die.
In the following days, Patsy encounters a group of road workers on a hillside. He asks the foreman for permission, hoping to join the team. At first, the foreman pretends to refuse, but after seeing Patsy's persistent eagerness, he eventually agrees. The reason the foreman acts this way is because he has been instructed by the two sons, allowing Patsy to believe he earned the job naturally rather than through their deliberate arrangement. When Patsy returns home, he immediately shares the news with his wife, who feels happy for him. Unfortunately, she is quietly enduring a growing pain in her abdomen, choosing not to tell anyone. Meanwhile, misfortune continues to unfold. Since going bankrupt, Patsy's younger brother has been trapped in deep despair, which ultimately worsens his lung illness. As the man reaches the end of his life, his two sisters come to visit him. Perhaps only at the brink of death can one truly see themselves clearly, as he blames his past mistakes. If he had not secretly invested behind his brother's back, perhaps they would still be living in their wealthy mansion. But in this world, there is no such thing as if or perhaps. The time consumed by desire can never be reclaimed, leaving behind only silence and endless regret. On the very next day after his passing, Sarah writes a letter to Patsy at the Kimberly Ranch, delivering the tragic news. But Mary's condition is also deteriorating rapidly, to the point where she can only lie in bed, unable even to stand. They mourn the unfortunate death of the younger brother, while also reflecting on everything that has happened in the past. From their homeland in Ireland to the long journey of immigrating to Australia, the warmth of enduring hardships together and the struggles for survival have now become memories that bring tears, leaving only a deep sense of change and loss. On a clear morning, Mary ultimately cannot escape the fate of death. She quietly gazes at her husband's back as she slowly closes her eyes. This remarkable woman, in a silent farewell, brings her difficult yet resilient life to an end. All her tenderness and endurance are forever frozen in the morning light. After Patsy buries his wife in this land, he spends a long time talking with his old friend Buntamura. They have known each other for 25 years, and that sincere friendship is deeply etched into their bones. Yet even now, Patsy does not know what Buntamura's real name actually is.
You don't even know who I am.
You're Pumpkin, you're my old friend. You're my brother.
Pumpkin. How long have we known each other?
25 years?
25 years. You still don't know my name. My name is Burrican.
When he hears the truth, Patsy cannot stop the tears from streaming down his face. This Indigenous man has been called Buntamura for many years, which was a common practice during the colonial era. When Buntamura finally says, "My name is Barigon," it means he has reclaimed his name, his identity, and his dignity. The reason Patsy cries is first because he finally realizes that the most loyal, kindest, and most trustworthy friend in his life has, all along, been unconsciously treated by him as someone of lower status. On the other hand, Patsy's tears are also for himself, for the immigrant who forgot the pain of his homeland. So the next day, under the watchful eyes of friends and family, he decides to return alone to his old home in Ireland. In the final stage of his life, he seeks to fulfill a wish that has been buried for half a lifetime, to touch the soil of his homeland, to stand before the weathered graves of his ancestors, and to place his remaining days where his dreams first began. With this, the series comes to a complete end. The King of Grass Fortress uses the immigrant epic of the Durack family to expose the brutal paradox of colonial expansion. The scattered moments of conscience throughout the story have long defined the eternal struggle between survival and dignity. Patsy emerges from the Irish famine, and every step he takes toward the Australian dream is balanced on a moral tightrope. He sets the gears of fate in motion with the coins of English merchants, while the prosperity of the ranch is watered with the suffering of Indigenous people. The depth of the story lies in how it fully reveals the hypocrisy of the frontier myth. Patsy repeats his father's obsession with land, yet becomes another layer of oppression himself. When he discovers his sons expanding in the Kimberley with guns, history completes its cruel cycle. The moment Buntamura reveals his true name, Barigon, marks an awakening of identity, reflecting Patsy's lifelong struggle with the guilt of occupation rather than true belonging. The rise and fall of 3 generations of the family is, in essence, a miniature reflection of colonial history. All wealth is stained with the suffering of others, and every success is accompanied by the erasure of culture. In the end, Patsy's return to Ireland is not a triumphant homecoming, but a sorrowful acceptance of a displaced fate. They have forever become strangers to their homeland, and wanderers in Australia. Alright, thank you everyone for staying with me. I am a film enthusiast, and I will see you in the next episode.